news today that Donald Trump is coming out swinging against Facebook. He apparently has a new book, and he said in the book that if Mark Zuckerberg has any thought of suppressing his speech and conservative speech, then, he better think again, because that could be very problematic, etc. Now, look, it's a private company, so they can kind of do what they want. But where we are starting to see perhaps real problems, if you would, for the government, not actually for Meta, not for Facebook, because, they're a private company, but where we see real problems is the Harris-Biden administration's attempt to suppress speech. That is what is most interesting to me in this entire story. And as I read again Mark Zuckerberg's letter, I want to remind you this is like massive. The New York Times still hasn't reported on it, for goodness sakes. I mean, come on, guys. But I mean, they should care, right? Like they're supposed to be journalists. This is huge. They're writing that in 2021, senior officials from the Biden administration, including the White House, repeatedly pressured our teams for months to censor certain COVID-19 content, including humor and satire, and expressed a lot of frustration with our teams when we didn't agree. Ultimately, it was our decision, he said, I don't know, whether or not to take content down, and we own our decisions, including COVID-19 related changes we made to our enforcement in the wake of the pressure. I believe the government pressure, though, he writes, was wrong. This is huge. The government, the FBI, was pressuring Facebook, not just on the COVID stuff, but also, here we go. In a separate situation, the FBI warned us about a potential Russian disinformation operation around the Biden family and Burisma in the lead up to the 2020 elections. You see that? I mean, this is huge. This is huge. You've got the FBI, which, by the way, knew that laptop was entirely real, entirely authentic. And yet the FBI, in an attempt to, frankly, I mean, how else do we say this, guys, manipulate the election, was out there with all their cronies, with 51X spooks, there you go, intelligence officials, writing in this very special letter, organized by none other than Anthony Blinken, our now Secretary of State, who's not doing us much good. By the way, China doesn't even want to deal with him. They got to go to Jake Sullivan now, because Anthony's not, I mean, John McCain called it years ago. He is not a talented man. He is wrong on everything. He may be smart. He may have gone to Harvard and now all the special degrees, but this guy should not be Secretary of State. So he runs a campaign effectively to censor this information. And then the Biden White House comes in. I was a victim of this myself, because we posted some kind of story on the Hunter Biden laptop. They shut me down. I was not able to access you guys for a year. People were like, where's Trish? Like, have I seen her? No, because that was bad. Okay, so now he's admitting all of this. And why is he admitting it? Ask yourself that. Why? Maybe Mark Zuckerberg is realizing, especially as we go into this brave new world with AI and all that represents, the metaverse is real. I mean, he kind of grabbed that name, good for him, but the metaverse is going to be incredible. Maybe he's realizing that this actually could get very dangerous very, very fast. I mean, think about what Biden fed us in 2020, remember?
50 former national intelligence folks who said that what he's accusing me of is a Russian plant. They have said that this has all the 5 former heads of the CIA, both parties, say what he's saying is a bunch of garbage.
This is classic Trump. We have 4 days left, and all of a sudden there's a laptop. There's overwhelming evidence that from the intelligence community that the Russians are engaged.
I still think that the stories from the fall about your son Hunter were Russian disinformation and a smear campaign, like you said.
Yes. I know you'd ask it. I have no response. It's another smear campaign. It's the last-ditch effort in this desperate campaign to smear me and my family. The vast majority of the intelligence people have come out and said there's no basis at all.
Wow. Okay, so that was the RNC
if you
that
really
put that
look
out.
at what's
Hang on one
happening
second. We are going to get to RFK and his comments on this momentarily, but just, you saw that, right? And now the timing's different, because that was when Biden was running for office, and he was saying all those things. He's like, oh, we have all these intelligence heads, the former heads of the CIA, four of them, both sides, both parties. I mean, for goodness sakes, how bad was this? How deep is the deep state that they were actually willing to do that in the first place? Think about that, guys. And it turns out it was all bogus and it was all wrong. And now we're finding out that the government then, once they got in there, started putting the screws to Facebook. This is terrifying stuff. You know it. I know it. And yes, RFK Jr. knows it. Watch him. No, they're not the good guys. The good guys have been saying, hey, stop censoring. Hey, this is what happened. The bad guys have said, shut your mouth up now, or we're just going to take away your accounts. We're going to take away your reach. And now Facebook is realizing that they were on the team with the bad guys, perhaps inadvertently, perhaps because they refused to really have their eyes wide open, perhaps because all the people they hire have been educated by all these Ivy woke league institutions that have their own set of problems. And consequently, these people got duped, totally duped. The FBI warned us about a potential Russian disinformation operation about the Biden family. And so what did they do? They demoted content. They pulled down content. They suppressed freedom of speech at the request of the Biden-Harris administration. And I wonder if Mark's regretting it right about now. I mean, he was blown away after they tried to take Trump out. They, the kid in Butler County, Pennsylvania, so much so that when he sat down with my former colleague at Bloomberg, Emily Chang, he said this.
I've done some stuff personally in the past. I'm not planning on doing that this time. And that includes, not endorsing either of the candidates. Now, look, there's obviously a lot of crazy stuff going on in the world. The historic events over the weekend. And on a personal note, it's, seeing Donald Trump get up after getting shot in the face and pump his fist in the air with the American flag is one of the most badass things I've ever seen in my life. But look, it's, and I think, look, it's, at some level as an American, it's like hard to not get kind of emotional about that spirit and that fight. And I think that's why a lot of people like the guy.
Yeah, it is why a lot of people like the guy. By the way, we've got a lot of weird policies right about now, including all this stuff on the deep state. So I encourage you to go check these guys out. 25truth.com. This is the Heritage Foundation's sort of vision of the future. Those on the left are, oh my God, they're so scared of this. They think it's all bad. It's none of it's bad. None of it's bad unless you believe in, again, suppressing speech, for goodness sakes. They've got some great stuff there about our freedom of speech, about our access to the best quality education, about making sure that from an energy standpoint, we are completely 1,000% energy independent, and that we continue to produce energy, all kinds of it, right here in the good old US of A. Go check them out. 25Truth, 25truth.com. Again, this is something that's put together, Project 2025, by the Heritage Foundation. A ton of good ideas in there, really and truly. But listen, guys, Facebook's a big deal. There's a lot of reach on Facebook. So when people were limited from actually engaging on Facebook, on the one hand, you can say, all right, if it's the company's decision, that's their decision. But if it's because it's pressure from the government, that's a whole other thing. They don't like politics very much on Facebook these days. They know that. So, hey, when you see the cooking video from me on Facebook, you'll know why. Look, they've made a decision. They don't want, they say on either side, to have a ton of politics. Okay, that's, so it's just sort of a fan page there on Trish Regan. And sometimes if you go looking for it, you might find this show and some political content. Fine. Okay, that is what it is. They're making a decision as a business. It's entirely different than what we saw in this letter. Entirely different than the FBI pressuring them. Entirely different than Fauci's team pressuring them. That's where you start getting into some really dicey territory. And Kamala Harris, that's on you, girl. That's totally, thoroughly, entirely on you as Vice President of the United States, even though I know you spent all that time in California going to hang out with your LA Hollywood friends while Joe was at the beach.